Unexpected emergency. The ISS Endeavour glided silently through the endless expanse of space, its crew of 6 humans focused on their groundbreaking mission. Captain Lena Novak, a seasoned veteran of deep space exploration, sat in her command chair, eyes fixed on the viewscreen displaying the wonders of the cosmos. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship, jolting the crew to attention. "Captain, we have a critical malfunction in the life support system," reported the ship's engineer, Jack Prescott, his voice tense with urgency. "Oxygen levels are dropping rapidly." Novak sprang into action, her voice calm but authoritative. "Prescott, diagnose the issue. Comms, send a distress signal to Earth. Navigator, plot a course to the nearest habitable planet." As the crew scrambled to their tasks, Novak couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary malfunction. The Endeavour was the most advanced ship in the fleet, equipped with state-of-the-art systems designed to withstand the rigors of deep space travel. Prescott's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, the malfunction is in the oxygen recycling unit. It's not responding to any of the automated repair sequences." Novak felt a chill run down her spine. Without a functioning oxygen recycler, they had limited time before the air became unbreathable. She turned to her second-in-command, Commander Mikhail Volkov. "Volkov, assemble a team to assist Prescott. We need to find a solution, and fast." As Volkov nodded and headed off the bridge, Novak tried to quell the rising sense of dread in her gut. They were light years from Earth, and even the nearest habitable planet was days away. If they couldn't fix the recycler, they would suffocate long before help could arrive. In the engine room, Prescott and his team worked frantically to diagnose the issue. The recycler was a complex piece of machinery, with countless components that could have failed. They checked every connection, ran every diagnostic, but nothing seemed to work. Hours passed, and the oxygen levels continued to drop. The crew grew increasingly anxious, the weight of their predicament hanging heavy in the recycled air. Novak knew that they were running out of time and options. Just as despair began to set in, Prescott's voice crackled over the intercom once more. "Captain, I think I have an idea. It's risky, and it goes against every protocol in the book, but it might just work." Novak leaned forward in her chair, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Go ahead, Prescott. At this point, we're open to anything." As Prescott outlined his plan, Novak felt a mix of apprehension and admiration. It was a daring solution, one that would require every ounce of ingenuity and determination the crew could muster. But if it worked, it could save their lives and the mission. Novak looked around at her crew, seeing the resolve in their eyes. They were the best of the best, chosen for this mission because of their skills, intelligence, and unwavering dedication. If anyone could pull off the impossible, it was them. With a deep breath, Novak made the call. "All right, Prescott, let's do this. But we're going to need everyone's help to make it happen." As the crew sprang into action, a sense of purpose filled the ship. They had a plan, a chance to survive, and they were determined to see it through. In the face of an unexpected emergency, the human spirit had risen to the challenge, ready to defy the odds and find a way forward. The human touch. In the engine room, Jack Prescott faced his team with a determined look in his eye. "All right, here's the plan," he began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We're going to bypass the oxygen recycler entirely and rig up a makeshift system using the ship's water supply and some spare parts." His team exchanged uncertain glances. "But sir," one of the engineers spoke up, "that's never been done before. It goes against every safety protocol in the manual." Prescott nodded, his jaw set. "I know, but we don't have a choice. If we don't try something, we'll run out of oxygen long before we reach help." He pulled up a schematic on the screen, pointing to various components. "We'll need to reroute the water from the storage tanks, run it through a series of filters to remove impurities, then use the ship's electrolysis system to split the water into oxygen and hydrogen. The oxygen will be fed into the air supply, while the hydrogen will be vented out into space. The team mulled over the plan, their brows furrowed in concentration. It was a risky proposition, but they could see the logic behind it. Slowly, they began to nod, their resolve strengthening. "All right, let's get to work," Prescott said, clapping his hands together. "We'll need to scavenge parts from all over the ship. Check every nook and cranny, every storage compartment. We'll make this happen, one way or another." As the team dispersed to gather supplies, Prescott turned his attention to the ship's eye, a sophisticated system designed to assist with complex tasks. "I need you to run simulations on the makeshift oxygen system. Help us identify any potential weak points or areas for improvement." The AI whirred to life, its calm voice filling the room. "Certainly, Engineer Prescott. Running simulations now." On the bridge, Captain Novik paced back and forth, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew that Prescott's plan was their best shot, but the risks were substantial. If something went wrong, they could lose more than just the oxygen supply. Commander Volkov approached her, his face etched with concern. "Captain, are you sure about this? We're putting a lot of faith in an untested system." Novik met his gaze, her eyes blazing with determination. "We have to trust in our crew, Volkov. They're the best of the best, and if anyone can make this work, it's them." She turned to the ship's comms officer, Ensign Rai. "Rai, I need you to send a message to Earth, informing them of our situation and our plan. Let them know that we're doing everything in our power to stay alive." Ray nodded, his fingers already flying over the console. "Yes, Captain." Message sent. As the hours ticked by, the crew worked tirelessly to assemble the makeshift oxygen system. They scavenged parts from every corner of the ship, repurposing components from non-essential systems to build the filters and piping. Prescott oversaw the process, his keen eye catching any potential issues before they could become problems. The AI ran constant simulations, providing real-time feedback and suggestions for optimization. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the system was ready for testing. The crew gathered in the engine room, their faces tense with anticipation. Prescott looked to Novak for the go-ahead. Novak took a deep breath, the weight of the moment heavy on her shoulders. "All right, Prescott. Let's see what this thing can do." With a nod, Prescott initiated the sequence. The ship's water supply began to flow through the makeshift piping, the filters whirring to life as they removed impurities. The electrolysis system hummed, splitting the water molecules into their component parts. For a moment, there was only silence, the crew holding their collective breath. Then, slowly, the oxygen levels on the ship began to rise, the makeshift system working just as Prescott had predicted. A cheer erupted from the crew, the tension of the past hours melting away in a wave of relief and joy. They had done it. They had found a way to survive, against all odds. Novak clasped Prescott's shoulder, a smile spreading across her face. "Well done, Prescott. You and your team have just saved our lives." Prescott grinned, the pride evident in his eyes. "We all did this together, Captain. The human spirit is a powerful thing." As the crew celebrated their victory, Novak couldn't help but marvel at the ingenuity and determination of her team. In the face of an impossible situation, they had come together, pooled their knowledge and skills, and found a solution that defied all expectations. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the unwavering resolve that had carried their species to the stars and beyond. And as the ISS Endeavour continued on its mission, Novik knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united in their common purpose and unbreakable bond. Ingenuity in action. With the makeshift oxygen system up and running, the crew of the ISS Endeavour could finally breathe a sigh of relief. But their respite was short-lived, as a new challenge soon presented itself. "Captain, we have a problem with the water filtration system," reported Olivia Chen, the ship's life support specialist. "The increased demand from the oxygen system is putting a strain on the filters, and they're starting to clog up." Captain Novik frowned, her mind already racing to find a solution. How long do we have before the filters fail completely? Chen shook her head. At the current rate, I'd say no more than 24 hours. And if the filters fail, we'll be right back where we started, with no way to produce oxygen. Novak turned to Prescott, who was already deep in thought. Jack, I need you and your team to find a way to extend the life of those filters. We can't afford another crisis. Prescott nodded, his eyes gleaming with determination. We'll figure it out, Captain. Failure is not an option. As Prescott and his team got to work, Novak turned to the rest of the crew. I know we're all exhausted, but we can't afford to let our guard down now. We need to conserve power as much as possible and be ready for anything. The crew nodded solemnly, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. They had already defied the odds twice, but this new crisis threatened to push them to their limits. In the engine room, Prescott and his team worked feverishly to diagnose the problem with the power core. They pored over schematics and readouts, trying to find the source of the instability. It looks like the containment field is failing, said Chen, pointing to a flickering display. If we can't find a way to reinforce it, the core will go critical. Prescott frowned, his mind racing with possibilities. What if we use the ship's magnetic shielding to create a secondary containment field? It won't be a permanent solution, but it might buy us enough time to figure out a more lasting fix. The team exchanged glances, the idea taking hold. It's risky, said Volkov, who had joined them in the engine room. If we divert too much power to the shielding, we could end up compromising other essential systems. Prescott nodded, his jaw set with determination. It's a risk we'll have to take. We don't have any other options. As the team worked to modify the magnetic shielding, Novak and the rest of the crew did everything they could to conserve power. They shut down non-essential systems, dimmed the lights, and even reduced the temperature in the living quarters to save energy. But as the hours ticked by, it became clear that the makeshift containment field was not enough. The power core continued to destabilize, the readings on the console growing more and more erratic. We need to do something drastic, said Prescott, his voice tight with tension. I'm going to have to go into the core chamber and try to manually stabilize the containment field. Novik's eyes widened in alarm. Prescott, that's too dangerous. The radiation levels in the core chamber are off the charts. If something goes wrong. Prescott met her gaze, his eyes blazing with determination. I know the risks, Captain, but if we don't do this, we're all dead anyway. I'm the only one with the expertise to pull this off. Novik hesitated for a moment, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. She knew that Prescott was right, but the thought of sending one of her crew into such a dangerous situation was almost too much to bear. Finally, she nodded, her voice tight with emotion. All right, Prescott, but you're not going in there alone. Volkov, suit up. You're going to be his backup. Volkov nodded, his face set with grim determination. Aye, Captain. As Prescott and Volkov suited up in heavily shielded environmental suits, the rest of the crew watched in tense silence. They knew that the fate of the ship and their own lives rested on the shoulders of these two brave men. With a final nod to Novak, Prescott and Volkov entered the core chamber, the heavy doors sealing behind them with an ominous thud. Inside, the air was thick with radiation, the containment field flickering and pulsing with an eerie light. Prescott made his way to the control panel, his hands shaking slightly as he began to input the necessary commands. Volkov stood watch, his eyes scanning the chamber for any signs of danger. For several long, tense minutes, there was only silence, broken only by the hum of the containment field and the occasional crackle of static over the comlink. Then, suddenly, an alarm began to blare, the containment field flickering dangerously. Prescott, what's happening? Novik's voice was tight with fear over the comm. The field is collapsing, Prescott shouted, his fingers flying over the controls. I'm trying to compensate, but it's not working. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash of light, and Volkov cried out in pain. Prescott whirled around, his heart in his throat, to see Volkov sprawled on the ground, clutching his arm. "Volkov's been hit," Prescott shouted over the comm. "I need to get him out of here." "No," Volkov gritted out, his face twisted in pain. "You have to finish the job, Prescott." "I'll be fine." Prescott hesitated for a moment, torn between his duty to the ship and his concern for his friend. But he knew that Volkov was right. If he didn't stabilize the containment field, they would all be dead. With a final, anguished look at Volkov, Prescott turned back to the control panel, his hands flying over the controls with renewed urgency. He could feel the radiation burning through his suit, the pain almost unbearable, but he pushed through it, focusing all of his energy on the task at hand. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the containment field stabilized, the alarms fading away into blessed silence. Prescott slumped against the control panel, his body weak with exhaustion and pain. As Prescott and his team got to work, Novak called a meeting with the rest of the crew. "All right, everyone, listen up. We bought ourselves some time with the oxygen system, but we're not out of the woods yet. We need to conserve water and minimize any non-essential activities until we can find a more permanent solution." The crew nodded in agreement, their faces set with resolve. They knew that every drop of water, every ounce of energy, was precious now. In the engine room, Prescott and his team pored over schematics and diagrams, searching for a way to optimize the filtration system. They tried everything from adjusting the flow rate to modifying the filter media, but nothing seemed to make a significant difference. As the hours ticked by, frustration began to mount. "There has to be something we're missing," muttered one of the engineers, rubbing his eyes in exhaustion. Suddenly, Prescott's eyes widened, a spark of inspiration igniting in his mind. "Wait a minute," he said, rushing over to the console. "What if we use the ship's 3D printer to create a new type of filter? One that's specifically designed for our unique situation." The team exchanged glances, the idea taking hold. "It's worth a shot," said Chen, who had joined them in the engine room. "But we'll need to design it quickly, and we'll only have one chance to get it right." Prescott nodded, his fingers already flying over the keyboard. "I'll need everyone's help on this. We'll have to use every scrap of knowledge and experience we have to make this work." For the next several hours, the team worked feverishly, designing and testing virtual prototypes of the new filter. They drew on their collective expertise, from materials science to fluid dynamics, to create a filter that could handle the increased demand and extend the life of the system. Finally, with the design complete, Prescott loaded it into the 3D printer. The machine whirred to life, layers of polymer and ceramic building up to form the intricate structure of the filter. As the printer worked, Novak and the rest of the crew waited anxiously, their eyes glued to the oxygen and water level displays. If the filter didn't work, they would be back to square one, with no way to produce the life-sustaining resources they needed. After what felt like an eternity, the printer finished its job, the new filter emerging from the machine like a technological miracle. Prescott and Chen carefully installed it into the filtration system, their hands shaking slightly with anticipation. "All right, let's see what this baby can do," said Prescott, initiating the system. For a moment, there was only silence, the crew holding their collective breath. Then, slowly, the water levels began to stabilize, the new filter working just as they had hoped. A cheer erupted from the crew, the tension of the past hours melting away in a wave of relief and joy. They had done it again. They had found a way to overcome the odds, to use their ingenuity and determination to solve an impossible problem. Captain Novak couldn't help but smile, the pride evident in her eyes. "You've done it again, Prescott. You and your team are the reason we're still alive." Prescott grinned, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "We're all in this together, Captain. Every single person on this ship has a role to play, and we couldn't have done it without each and every one of them." As the crew celebrated their victory, Novak knew that they had proven once again the unbreakable spirit of humanity. No matter what challenges lay ahead, No matter how daunting the odds, they would face them together, armed with the knowledge that there was no problem too great, no obstacle too insurmountable for the human mind to overcome. A fight against time. Just as the crew of the ISS Endeavour thought they could catch their breath, a new crisis emerged. The ship's main power core, a complex fusion reactor that provided energy for all essential systems, began to fluctuate dangerously. "Captain, we have a problem," said Commander Volkov, his face grim as he studied the readouts on the console. "The power core is destabilizing. If we don't find a way to fix it soon, we could be looking at a complete systems failure." Captain Novak felt a chill run down her spine. Without power, they would be dead in the water, drifting helplessly through the void of space. "How much time do we have?" Volkov shook his head. "It's hard to say for sure, but based on the current rate of deterioration, I'd estimate no more than 12 hours. Novak nodded, her mind already racing to find a solution. "All right, we need to buy ourselves some time. Prescott, I need you and your team to find a way to stabilize the core, even if it's just a temporary fix." Prescott, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. "We'll do our best, Captain, but we're going to need every resource we have. This is going to be our toughest challenge yet." "Prescott, are you all right?" Novik's voice was tight with concern over the comm. "I'm fine, Captain," Prescott managed, his voice raspy. "The containment field is stable. We did it." A cheer erupted over the comm link, the crew's relief and joy palpable even through the static. Novik's voice was thick with emotion as she spoke. "Well done, Prescott. You and Volkov are heroes. Now get yourselves to the medbay, on the double." As Prescott helped Volkov to his feet, supporting his weight as they made their way out of the core chamber, he couldn't help but marvel at the strength and resilience of his crewmates. They had faced impossible odds, pushed themselves to the brink of their limits, and somehow, against all odds, they had prevailed. It was a testament to the unbreakable spirit of humanity, the unwavering determination that had carried them to the stars and beyond. And as the ISS Endeavour continued on its mission, Prescott knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united in their common purpose and unshakable bond. Resilience and determination. In the aftermath of the power core crisis, the crew of the ISS Endeavour found themselves battered and bruised, but unbroken. Prescott and Volkov had been rushed to the medbay, where they were treated for radiation exposure and other injuries sustained during their harrowing ordeal. As the ship's doctor worked to stabilize their condition, Captain Novak called a meeting of the remaining crew members. They gathered in the ship's mess hall, their faces drawn and tired, but still alight with the fire of determination. "We've been through a lot these past few days," Novak began, her voice heavy with emotion. "We've faced challenges that would have broken lesser crews, and we've come through them stronger than ever. But our mission is far from over, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next." She looked around the room, making eye contact with each member of her crew. "I know you're all exhausted, and I know that some of you may be wondering if it's all worth it. But I want you to remember why we're out here, why we've chosen to dedicate our lives to this mission." Novak took a deep breath, her eyes shining with conviction. "We're here to explore the unknown, to push the boundaries of what's possible, and to bring hope and inspiration to all of humanity. We're here to prove that even in the darkest of times, even when all seems lost, the human spirit can never be extinguished." The crew nodded solemnly, their faces set with determination. They knew that their captain was right, that they had a duty to carry on, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. But even as they steeled themselves for the challenges to come, tensions began to rise among the crew. The stress of the past few days, combined with the uncertainty of their future, had taken its toll, and tempers were starting to fray. It started with small things, a snippy comment here, a curt reply there. But as the days wore on, the conflicts began to escalate, threatening to tear the crew apart from within. Novak did her best to keep the peace, to remind her crew of their common purpose and shared values. But even she was not immune to the stress and strain of their situation, and there were times when she found herself snapping at her subordinates or making decisions that she later regretted. Things came to a head when a disagreement between two of the crew members, a systems engineer named Leo and a navigation officer named Rodriguez, erupted into a full-blown shouting match in the middle of the ship's bridge. "You're not listening to me," Leo shouted, his face red with anger. "If we don't reroute power to the secondary systems, we'll be flying blind. And if we do that, we'll be leaving ourselves vulnerable to another power core failure." Rodriguez shot back, her eyes flashing with frustration. "We can't take that risk." Novak stepped between them, her voice sharp with authority. "Enough. Both of you, stand down. We can't afford to be fighting among ourselves, not now." But even as she spoke, Novak could feel the tension in the room, the simmering resentment and fear that threatened to boil over at any moment. She knew that she had to do something, had to find a way to bring her crew back together before it was too late. And then, in a moment of sudden clarity, she knew what she had to do. She called the crew together once more, but this time, instead of a formal meeting, she invited them to join her in the ship's observation lounge, where the vast expanse of space stretched out before them in all its infinite beauty. As they gathered around the viewing portal, Novak began to speak, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "Look out there," she said, gesturing to the stars. "That's what we're fighting for. That's what we're here to explore and understand." She turned to face her crew, her eyes shining with emotion. "I know that we're all scared, and I know that we're all tired. But we can't let that fear and exhaustion tear us apart. We have to remember that we're all in this together, that we're all part of something greater than ourselves." Novak reached out and took Liu's hand, then Rodriguez's, then the hands of every other member of her crew. "We're a family," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "And family means that nobody gets left behind, no matter what." As she spoke, Novak could feel the tension in the room beginning to dissipate, could see the hard lines of anger and frustration on her crew's faces softening into something like understanding and compassion. And in that moment, she knew that they would make it through this, that they would find a way to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead, not because they were the strongest or the smartest or the bravest, but because they had each other, and because they believed in something greater than themselves. They believed in the unbreakable spirit of humanity, the resilience and determination that had carried their species to the stars and beyond. And as the ISS Endeavour continued on its mission, Novak knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, united in their common purpose and unshakable bond. Triumph of the human spirit. With their resolve renewed and their spirits lifted, the crew of the ISS Endeavour threw themselves into the final leg of their mission with a fierce determination. They knew that they were on the brink of a breakthrough, that the data they had collected and the discoveries they had made could change the course of human history forever. But even as they pushed themselves to the limit, working long hours and battling through exhaustion and adversity, they never lost sight of what truly mattered: their bond as a crew, their shared purpose, and their unwavering belief in the strength of the human spirit. Prescott and Volkov, still recovering from their injuries but unwilling to be left behind, joined their crewmates in the lab, poring over the data and running countless simulations. They were determined to find the answers they sought, to unlock the secrets of the universe and bring hope and inspiration to all of humanity. And then, in a moment of sudden clarity, they found it: the key to unlocking the mysteries of dark matter, the elusive substance that made up most of the universe, but had eluded scientific understanding for centuries. The crew gathered around the main view screen, their eyes wide with wonder as the data streamed in, painting a picture of the cosmos that was more beautiful and more complex than anything they had ever imagined. "This is it," Prescott breathed, his voice filled with awe. "This is what we've been searching for all along." Novak nodded, her eyes shining with pride and emotion. "And we found it together," she said softly. as a team, as a family. As the realization of their achievement began to sink in, the crew of the ISS Endeavour felt a surge of emotion, unlike anything they had ever experienced before. They had done it. They had pushed the boundaries of human knowledge and understanding, had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. And in that moment, they knew that their mission had been about more than just scientific discovery. It had been about the unbreakable spirit of humanity, about the resilience and determination that had carried their species to the stars and beyond. As they prepared to return to Earth, the crew took a moment to reflect on all that they had been through, on the challenges they had faced and the bonds they had forged. "You know," Volkov said softly, his voice filled with emotion, "when I first signed up for this mission, I thought it was all about the science, about making a name for myself and advancing my career." He looked around at his crewmates, his eyes shining with tears. "But now I realized that it was about so much more than that. It was about being part of something greater than myself, about pushing the limits of what's possible and inspiring others to do the same." Novak nodded, her own eyes filled with tears. "That's what it means to be human," she said softly. "To never give up, to never stop fighting for what we believe in, no matter how difficult the road may be." As the ISS Endeavour began its long journey back to Earth, the crew knew that they would never be the same again. They had been through the fire and emerged stronger, more united, and more determined than ever before. And as they looked out at the vast expanse of space, they knew that their mission was far from over. There were still mysteries to be unlocked, still frontiers to be explored, and they would face them all together, as a team, as a family. For they were human, and the human spirit could never be extinguished. It would always rise to the challenge, always find a way to triumph over adversity, no matter how dark the night or how daunting the odds. And as the ISS Endeavour sailed onward, boldly going where no human had gone before, the crew knew that they were setting an example for all of humanity, showing the world that greatness was possible, that there was nothing they could not achieve when they worked together. In the end, that was the true legacy of their mission. Not the scientific breakthroughs they had made or the records they had broken, but the unbreakable spirit of humanity that they had embodied, the resilience and determination that had carried them to the stars and beyond. And as they looked to the future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles they might face, they would meet them head-on, united in their purpose and their belief in the strength of the human spirit. For they were explorers, pioneers, and heroes, and their mission was far from over. The universe was vast and infinite, and there were still wonders to be discovered, still frontiers to be conquered. And they would face them all together, as a crew, as a team, as a family. For they were human, and they were unstoppable. The end.